Hey y'all, Pastor Emil here with another episode of Sweet Jesus. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is sweeter. Tea and honey is sweet, and whatever you got in your coffee thing. Sorry about the...
It's very sweet. Knowing how to work your new phone is sweet.
Well, that is another thing, right? So like the volume only adjusts certain things at certain times.
Yeah. I've had an iPhone for a decade, and I still haven't figured out what does what and different features with the volume. It's
almost
confusing.
Too fancy sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, that isn't normally part of the intro. So we talk about ice cream. We talk about the honey and everything. iPhones are sweet, sort of, in their own way. We'll see. I don't know. I'm still new to this. But Jesus, of course, is far sweeter. And that's ultimately what we're here to talk about. We've been going through this sort of series, I guess, on what does it mean, Christianity 101? What does it all mean? What is life about? What is the Christian faith about? Why are we here? We've tried to answer all different kinds of questions. We've been looking at the 10 Commandments, and we are actually finishing those up today. Although when I was looking, there is the close of the commandments too, which we could talk about.
That's pretty unique to Luther's approach. I don't always get into it, but it can be helpful.
I got some ideas I'll run by afterward. But right now, the 9th and 10th commandments, they are actually printed on the same page in the catechism that I'm looking at least.
Yeah.
Right. So because they're pretty much the same thing. But really, the 10 Commandments, no matter what you do with the 10 Commandments, you wind up with something like that. Either
That's true.
You shall have no other gods, you shall not worship you shall not have a graven image, right? Or make a graven image. What was a graven image? It was a god.
It was another god.
It was an idol.
Yeah.
It was
an explanation of the first commandment is how I look at it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then what's this? I don't know. They probably are better off together.
I think so.
But whatever. 10 Commandments, 612 was it, or 613?
Yeah, I think it was more than that. But
the around the time of Jesus, they had created all these extra things. Hey, whatever. I always remember, was it History of the World Part 1 with Mel Brooks comes down. I bring you these 15 10 commandments.
There's a part 2 online now.
I saw there's something coming out, I mean, who knew we'd be talking about Mel Brooks? Not Mel. No.
Mel Brooks.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, 9th and 10th commandments. We're getting into this where it's very clearly now not just about outward actions.
Very true.
Not just about things to do and not do. It's about matters of the heart.
Yeah.
And, I think we've talked about really the whole time things that are going on in our hearts. But here it's putting it on all kinds of other stuff. Well, let me just read it, and then you can tell me what you think and what you got going on in your head. Well, not everything you got going on in your head, but you know what I mean.
Thank you for clarifying.
The 9th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not scheme to get our neighbor's inheritance or house or get it in a way which only appears right, but help and be of service to him in keeping it. And the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his manservant or maidservant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not entice or force away our neighbor's wife, workers, or animals, or turn them against him, but urge them to stay and do their duty. So what do you got for us?
Well, okay, so the key word in these commandments, or this commandment, depending on how you look at it, is covet. And as you pointed out, rightly so, this commandment really gets into the heart, and what our motivations are. And so that's what we're examining with the question of coveting. And so the question then becomes, how do you define that? How do you define coveting?
I mean, I think, we use synonyms, envy, or I think lust is an appropriate
Sure.
term that we
It's a
could
good one.
use for it. We use it primarily for sexual desires, unhealthy sexual desires. But I think it applies here. You mentioned content. Did you say contentment?
I don't think
No,
so.
you didn't say. I read it here then. That's what it was.
Okay.
God created us to be content with
Yeah.
the gifts by which he sustains our life. I actually think that's better than what I probably haven't thought of it that way. So you asked me what I think. Forget what I thought. That's actually pretty good. But covet is to want something that somebody else has, probably because they have it.
Yeah, and so that's where I think that's where the difficulty I've had in teaching this commandment. I can say things when I've taught it before about what it covers and what it means for us, and people tend to smile and nod because they get it. They know the word to covet. But I think we kind of have a hard time distinguishing coveting from other kinds of wanting. And so how do you get into that? How do you unpack this idea of it is a kind of wanting, but it's a kind of wanting that does damage? I see stuff I want all the time. I was telling you when I showed up today, a couple of things I was looking at. Maybe about a year from now, I'll be thinking about getting a new car. So when I drive anywhere, I'm looking at cars. I'm checking them out, what features I like, what I don't like, and things like that. And I'm thinking, man, okay, that one I like. I would get online and look up some details about that. I like that. Maybe I want that car. Is that coveting? I think I'm planning for the future and just putting some forethought into something that's a big decision. So I don't know that it's necessarily causing me damage in my relationships.
No, well, it could, but it especially would if it belonged to somebody else.
Right. So where's the threshold? Where's the threshold for this?
Well, that's like, back to lust again, just for a moment. There are some things with some actually Catholic friends of mine that we had some conversations in this room about lust, maybe a year and a half ago. And one of the things that stuck out to me with their theological framework and the way they view it is that lust is basically looking at something and seeing it only for what you can get out of it, right? So you're looking at this person and what kind of satisfaction can this person, their body, whatever, bring to me, and removing it from the relational reality.
Yeah. So is this wanting getting in the way of me loving in a godly way?
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So, this is particularly about wanting things that don't belong to you and belong to other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's certainly how Luther phrases it.
Yeah, which really, I mean, I don't know if you've got some good examples for this. I know of a few, but they're not coming right now. But there's something about seeing something or wanting something that someone else wants that makes it more desirable.
Way more desirable, absolutely.
And suddenly you get it, and you don't really want it anymore.
Yep.
So far, the iPhone thing, I was a little jealous of people. I was coveting people with iPhones, but
I know you've been staring at mine as long as I've been coming here.
No buyer's remorse just yet.
Yeah.
Couple little annoying things, but no, like somebody, is coveting someone else's boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse, right? They get that person, they lure them away, they destroy the life that they had, that this person had previously, and the lives of all those they were connected to, and now they have them, and I don't really want all of that.
Yeah. It was
just about the moment.
It was about control.
It was control. And something about we do have this desire, like in this broken, sinful world, we just like breaking stuff sometimes. Like, I don't think we think that way, but just the way we behave, like we just have this tendency to break stuff.
Yeah.
We break our lives.
Yeah,
Right. We
absolutely.
are the ones who make the most mess most of the time. So
yeah, it's interesting. An example of this that as you were reading, and you were talking about, I think, the 10th commandment and the enticement, something that popped into my head that kind of made me laugh was we have some friends that live near us that occasionally they'll go out of town and we dog sit for them. And they have this little dog who's very sweet, and he'll come over, and he's wonderful to have for a couple of days. And I've gotten pretty close with this dog, and I'll never forget one time after we'd done this, and the dog kind of got to know me. We went somewhere, and the guy was there with the dog, and he and I called the dog at exactly the same time, and the dog ran to me. And it was this very visceral sense of satisfaction that I got out of that. And, it's kind of a goofy example, but I mean, it's also kind of I think a microcosm of how we tend to look at our lives, as, it's got to be about me somehow. Something else that popped into my head, and I remember talking about it recently. It might not have been in here, might have been in a class I was teaching. In C.S. Lewis, The Screwtape Letters, there's a chapter in there that deals with the main figure in this book, his mother, and what's said about her is that she is a glutton. But it doesn't mean she overconsumes. The example that's given is that she's the kind of person who will go out for tea and someone will offer her a slice of cake. And when they cut it, she'll have to send it back and say, no, I need a smaller piece. And that was described as a kind of gluttony. And the idea behind it is that the things we consume eventually start to consume us in one way or another. It's not what we do with it necessarily. It's about how we think about it and what's in our hearts. So I think coveting really kind of speaks to that as well.
Well, and I don't think coveting is necessarily just about wanting things that other people have, right? So like this, when the stuff that we have starts to consume us, I think we live in a culture that I'm not knocking capitalism, okay, but the realities of the way that it works in our system is, you're constantly bombarded with people trying to sell you stuff.
Well, it's the solution. The solution to your boredom, your loneliness, your struggle, just get something.
Yeah.
This thing will satisfy you in a way. It's, goodness, I don't know about you and your family, but during the shutdown 3 years ago, when we couldn't experience much of the world and we were stuck at home, that Amazon button on my phone got a lot of use.
Yeah.
And we wound up with a lot of weird stuff at home.
We were a little busy moving.
No, that's true. Yeah, that was a difficult time for you. Yeah.
So much for shutdown, stay-at-home order. We just moved our home, so we stayed in a different home.
But
but that's very true. It's a very common experience. So you're not alone with that. And there is something about just getting something that does feel a little bit good. Just that's why shopping can be an addiction. Spending money can be an addiction, just like anything else. Because there is a sense of satisfaction, all that kind of stuff. But we're constantly enticed into coveting because someone is always trying to make a profit in their business, sell a product, right? Product or service, and the way you do that is by meeting a need. The best way to do that, psychologically, social, understanding human behavior and all that kind of stuff, is say, hey, what's a problem that you have? How can I help you solve that problem or meet a need that you have, right? And so they're constantly doing that. They, of course, use all these other enticing things too. Like, I think actually in seminary, they may have actually showed us this commercial in a class on preaching or something like that. It was a commercial for a Hardee's, I think it was Hardee's burger.
Oh, with
There's some chick, like,
wasn't it like Paris Hilton or somebody?
I don't know who it was. I
know exactly the commercial you're talking about.
Scantily clad,
Yeah.
right, and just being
Wasn't she
very
like leaning up against a car
sexual,
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then like at the very last second, she takes a bite out of a burger or
Yeah.
something, and you're like, wait,
Oh.
this was about a burger? So they use those kinds of tactics too.
absolutely.
They put all of that association together to try to get us to want in a way that we probably don't need to want. I mean,
absolutely.
Desire in the Bible is not always a bad thing, but it's like desire the greater gifts,
Right. Exactly.
not these things.
What you were just describing, I think there's another tactic that is commonly used, and I think it ties, as Luther has it here, these two commandments together. Because I think a lot of people, when you explain the 9th commandment this way, a lot of people easily get on board. They're like, okay, I can definitely see how that's, impacted my life. You start talking 10th commandment, and I think people might run into a little bit of problem understanding where that intersects with their lives, because they don't think about their lives in those terms, that I'm intentionally trying to entice away my neighbor's wife or dog, or whatever. Yeah. But it's hard to see ourselves in those. But I think one of the greatest marketing techniques that people have tapped into is what we see online, especially in social media. And that is stacking your life up against someone else's. Mm-hmm. This person has a great life because they have this car or whatever. Don't you want to be like this person? Don't you want to have their life? And when we start to look at our neighbors and their lives, their family life, gosh, they all look so satisfied and happy. Man, that's what I want. I want that life. I want to be that person. We don't rarely, if ever, articulate that to ourselves, but that's what's behind, I think, a lot of behavior.
Yeah. Well, and again, our culture facilitates this because it is, as you were talking about the difference between the 9th and 10th, the 10th to me seems more like threatening their livelihood. Like it's almost like as a business, right? Because you had servants, you had animals, and this was how you created, provided for yourself, your family, your descendants, all that kind of stuff. And so I started thinking about, okay, like enticing workers away, right? Like, hey, here's a hotshot coder. We were talking about coding before, right? I don't know anything about coding. Well, next to nothing about coding. But hey, if you're running a business and you need someone to work computer code, you want to find the best you can. Sure. And so you're going to try.
Snatch them away.
That's literally this is how it works. Our society is set up to break this in a sense.
And we're good with it. It's economic Darwinism, right?
Yeah.
It
does seem to work really well.
It's very
very effective.
Yeah.
But here's the danger. In one sense, it's good that it provides freedom and opportunity for the worker in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? But the danger is, of course, that, what we talked about earlier, like you're just enticing them just to entice them. But when they get there, they're going to go, oh, man, this is awful.
Yeah.
This sucks so bad.
Yeah.
I want to go back. Right?
Yeah.
The grass isn't always greener. And if you're enticing just to entice and you can't back it up and support what you're promising or all that other kind of stuff. It's really just a recipe for disaster.
That's true.
Because now you're coveting what you had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why the word contentment is a good place for us to go, because I do find myself, and I don't know that anyone's doing it to me either. Like, I don't know that it's the culture. I don't know that it's, economic Darwinism or anything like that. I think we are just naturally wired as human beings, which is why we have the system that we have in this country, is because it's trying to play into the natural wiring within human beings. And if we're all kind of looking out for ourselves, sort of, and we have freedom to do that, then it tends to work well. But you find yourself just discontent about the stupidest things. You got all kinds of junk that you're worried about that you wish could be better, and then you forget what you already have. And, I've been guilty of that. That's probably one of my biggest faults, is just constantly looking ahead instead of being in the moment.
Yes.
And then I forget what it was recently that really kind of got my attention, but I've started to be like, I really have like a lot of what I've wanted. So why am I so discontent?
Yeah. We talk about contentment a lot, or we should be talking about it a lot in the church and in the message of our relationship with the Lord. And it's something that I think a lot of people take just sort of on a proverbial, position. But really and truly, I think it's all of us. And, why? Is the world involved in that? Yes. But maybe not so directly. I think the world has sort of done its job of programming us to just intuitively think that way, so that we go seeking the things that we covet. They don't have to come chasing us.
But the world is discontent too.
Sure, exactly.
And I think that's really what it, there's, Tim Keller had a great sermon on this at one point. He talked about this idea of homelessness, like this feeling. He had some crazy German philosopher he quoted too, which I don't know who the heck any of those people are, but it sounds really smart, and it makes me feel smart when I listen to it, But then he just really talked about this idea that we are not in a place that can ever make us content.
Yeah.
So in some sense, the battle for contentment is a permanent one this side of eternity.
Absolutely.
So it's one you don't ever fully satisfy. We talked about this with satisfaction a while back.
Right.
We're just, nothing is ever going to work perfectly right. And even if it does, it'll only be for a little while, and then something will happen and derail it.
Like my garbage disposal and my thermostat.
Exactly. I mean, but not just that, but people, right? Like, and systems and groups of people. You get this like sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but you just get a good vibe, and everything seems to be kind of firing on all cylinders, and you're on cruise control, and then all of a sudden you're not on cruise control anymore. Yeah. That idiot pulled out in front of you, and you got to slow down. Or you got to go around, or you never have something long enough, working long enough, doing what it's supposed to do long enough to really set your heart on it or to set your hopes in it. And I think God is okay with that, because he wants us to be content in him.
Right.
Like, he is the one that brings contentment.
It's interesting that, the close of the commandments and the opening of the commandments, just form this perfect arc, because if we found contentment in all the things that we've been chasing in this life, then we would have no use for God. They would replace him as our gods.
But I think even framing it that way makes God out to be the bad guy. in the sense that, so God made us this way so that, you know, like, we're just never going to be content. He's just like punishing us or something like that. And I don't think it's quite that. I think he made us for himself. He made us in his image. And he is the source of our life and everything. And without him, we just don't work right.
Right.
And not because he's trying to be tricky about it, just because this is the way it is. Like, a fish doesn't live outside of water. The fish lives in water.
We made the world this way.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
We are the ones who screw everything up in the world.
Yeah, so we're chasing our tails for something that has been promised to us and that is provided for us daily. You know, it just sometimes we're too blind to see it. I've had moments of clarity, you know, especially the older I get. I get more and more perspective on this, and I have tried to integrate it into my outlook. And one of the ways that I'm doing that is in my daily prayers, kind of cataloging the ways that God has provided for my life today and what I'm grateful for, you know, and also being aware, outwardly so in my prayers, of the things that I might not have tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and how quickly, and the people whose lives have changed so quickly that I know how quickly my own can change.
Yeah, we've had a lot of that in at Open Arms lately. Just people dealing with stuff. I think you probably are aware of this. Maybe folks are aware or not at home. December was just like terrible. You know, we had a funeral. Someone who died near the end of November. A funeral was in the heart of December. Older guy, you know, in his 90s, sort of expected, but still, no matter how expected it is, you're just looking at what the world lost.
Right.
And so there's that guy. And then there's, a 40-year-old guy drops dead, leaving behind 4 kids. And I'm like, I'm 41.
Ooh, close to home?
Yeah, I actually had heart issues, congenital heart issues. So what I'm told, I'm in fantastic health at this point. It's all been repaired, but still. And then, you know, 47-year-old mom dies, right? Tragically died. Not like a long bout of cancer, not like anything expected, just gone. And very recently now, we've got somebody here at Open Arms that's been struggling with cancer. She's in her 50s. They're just getting ready to retire well together right off into the sunset. And now, you know, she's kind of in her last days. So it should make us reflect on what we already have. It doesn't always.
Well, it makes me think about actually the text I'm developing right now for my sermon this Sunday is John chapter 9, the whole chapter. You know,
that's all
the
one story.
Yeah, it is
hard to take it apart.
You know, Jesus heals a man who's blind, and it's kind of the story of everything, you know, that happens after that. But I'm zeroing in on the very first couple of verses where Jesus passes this man on the street, this poor blind guy. He's probably just sitting there with his hand out, and he kind of notices him, and then the disciples notice Jesus noticing, and they look at it, and they see this tragic figure. You know, it's, man, there's nothing any of us could have done. You know, he was born that way. You know, how do you make sense of that? And their question to Jesus is, who sinned that God decided that needed to happen?
Who's the jerk? Who's the idiot?
Yeah. And I'm kind of developing that question they ask, because we don't say that now. We don't look at a tragic figure and say, you know, who screwed up, you know, to make that happen. We have a different way of asking it. Why do bad things happen?
Yeah.
It's the same question. And then Jesus answers it. He gives this very concise, direct answer to their question so that the works of God can be seen in him. And what I'm kind of talking about is how stinking unsatisfying an answer that is. Nobody's filing that one away as answered.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Jesus. Finally, some clarity. But the reason is we have to look for blame. We have to look for fault. We got to look for a reason other than the simple goodness of God. To that light to be found in the darkness. And that's what makes this so difficult for us, to understand those why questions.
I actually talked about that last Sunday and last night at confirmation, going through the first article of the Creed. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. What do we believe? Well, he made everything, and he still takes care of it, protects me, provides me everything I need, protects me from all danger. Really?
You buy that?
Yeah. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so what about suffering?
Yeah.
What do we do about that? And the reality is that while we don't have the most satisfying answers or answers that we wish we had, Christianity provides better answers.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, you can't really get upset about it without first believing that there is a God.
Well, and the cap to that story about the blind man who was healed is that he goes around and nobody else is happy about what happens to him. Everybody else is like, "Why aren't you blind anymore?"
His parents aren't even happy about it because they're all
those
freaked
two
out.
train wrecks. Yeah. And then, the religious leaders are yelling at the guy, and he's content. He's like, "I don't know. This dude came out of nowhere. He spit on me, which was kind of weird. And then now I can see, and I'm content.
Yeah.
I'm happy." That is the works of God that is demonstrated in him. His contentment. Wow. His joy, with the new life he's been given. And that's all God asks of us, is to just receive what he gives and be happy and joyful in the life that we have.
Well, and this really ties back to the first commandment in, kind of the direction we're heading here. We're looking for something in these things that they cannot provide.
That's right.
And it's not God being a jerk. It's that God is God.
Yeah.
And it's who God is that actually brings new life, satisfaction, contentment, all that kind of stuff. When you look at the very end, right? We in churches, particularly in funerals, this hope that we give of no more weeping, no more crying, no more pain, no more death. It appears in Isaiah 25, but also Revelation 21 is essentially quoting Isaiah.
That's right.
And if you read those first few verses, it recites those, but then it talks about, actually, I forget I think actually the order is first we find out what happens, and then we find out the fulfillment, which is there will be no more weeping or crying or pain, right? And the order is God shows up to dwell with man. It actually says the dwelling place of God will be with man.
Yeah.
So the new heavens, the new earth are coming down out of heaven. God is returning to his temple. This, like the creation actually is his temple. I heard some things about when you look at Genesis in the creation account, it's God creating a temple. We are the image bearers.
Yeah.
Not some carved thing that everyone else is using, but like real living breathe. Like this is how cool God is. God doesn't have little stones in places, right? He has living, breathing things that actually do things like he does things.
Right.
So he returns once, it's been, his temple's been purged of the impurity of sin and death and all this other kind of stuff. And it's his presence, I think, what the scriptures are telling us, his presence is actually what leads to no more suffering, no more pain, no more dying.
Absolutely.
That is what does it. And so we have access to that presence now in a now not yet way, right? So we have it, and yet it's not yet fully realized. We have a foretaste of the feast to come when we pray, when we focus on God and the gifts that he's given us, when we recount his deeds, talk about how wonderful he is, talk about how he healed our blindness, right? That is what ultimately brings contentment. The Psalms are full of that, about how the psalmist is just going to tell the world about everything he's done.
That's right.
All his great works. That is actually what brings, I think, helps bring contentment.
I think so. Yeah, I like that you tied those images together. Over the years, I've come to understand the beginning and the end of the Bible as 2 points, not on a linear narrative that are far away from each other, but 2 points at the end of a circle that are right back to each other. I think what is promised in that last chapter is a return to the garden. I think that's where we've been headed ever since we stumbled out of it. And I think that presence, that reunion of the perfect fellowship that we were created, that this world was created to accommodate, I think that is what is promised,
Yeah.
So.
And it's even better.
Oh, yeah.
Like not just Eden, but somehow Eden
And
2.0.
And what we get to experience now, if you go back to Genesis, after the fall, after Adam and Eve lost the garden, immediately the narrative picks up with Eve conceiving a child, life, how God provides for them, how they may be stumbling around, but he's not absent. He's looking out for them. He's providing for their children, even at the lowest points of their lives.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the existence that we live in until that garden is opened up to us again.
Finding contentment in the only person that we really can allows us to find contentment in lots of other things.
That's right.
That we have, but always looking forward to the full realization of what we need, that full satisfaction that we're looking for. Always kind of going through life feeling as if we're a little bit like that homelessness, like we're just not quite where we should be, where we want to be. That's actually okay. It's just not okay to let that dominate and to get frustrated by it, because you can't change it.
Right.
If you try to satisfy it with any of the things in these 2 commandments, this list, or anything else not on the list expressly put here in the list, it's just going to move you on to the next thing.
Yeah.
It's going to move you on to the next thing.
Well, the things that are described in these commandments, they're drugs. They're things that live up to their promise for a little while, and then they don't. And now you're unsatisfied again. So you have to repeat this cycle of chasing and seeking and finding. And every time you repeat the cycle throughout your life, that moment of satisfaction just gets paler and paler.
Well, it's like drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Your tolerance builds up. You need more and more of those things. I mean,
you got to get that fix quicker and quicker.
We are the wealthiest nation on the planet. People have so much junk that, we don't even need it. We don't even hardly use it. It doesn't even last for very long. And we're the most unsatisfied people in history. The most disgruntled and...
Oh, yeah. What we were talking about these things, our phones earlier, and what they do. I can open up my phone here and get on the internet and ask any question and find an answer to it. A couple of 100 years ago, kingdoms would have been given for that kind of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we use it for?
Playing video games.
I play Mario Kart, yes. You know?
Oh,
I mean, it really speaks to where we are and what we're seeking.
humans suck.
Yeah, I'm telling
It
you,
is
man.
so awful.
Great philosopher Jerry Seinfeld. People, they're the worst.
And yet they are would make life most satisfying, right?
That's
We're
right.
talking about all the things that we're missing out on because we're not in the moment. We're not enjoying who we have while we have them. You know, my wife, my kids, particularly been thinking about that a lot. They grow so fast, you know, and I better be nicer to my wife because, you know, it's just going to be the two of us. I hope she doesn't look and go, wait, I married him?
Yeah, we're getting there. We have one who's out of the house and one who's, you know, in high school. We just got a few years left, and you know, I don't know what's going to happen. You know, it's and I'm grateful for the time we have, but yeah, it makes you realize how fast it all flies by. You know.
Well, and even back to our conversation, right? If you make your life all about your kids, even,
Yeah,
they're leaving.
that's right.
And then they're going to spend 20 years trying to figure out, you know, what they went through the first 18 or so. And, you know, maybe you'll see them again.
You know, I think what we are called to do here is to be better stewards of what our God has provided us with in this life and how he sustains this life. And if we are good stewards of those gifts, then other people's gifts don't really take on much meaning.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I've definitely found myself thinking about this and doing it all wrong, you know, thinking about what I might have instead of thinking about what I do have.
Yeah.
What
absolutely.
I feel like I need or want, and then winding up missing out on what is already here. So it's actually, this is again grace. God is telling us some things here, not to smack us upside the head. Be like, you idiots, I'm going to make your life miserable. I'm going to say you can't want anything that anybody else has. No, he's saying, come on, guys. I made you. I know how it's supposed to work. I know how you're wired, okay? I'm intimately involved with that whole process of forming you, okay? You are going to be way happier
Yes.
if you can just find contentment. And actually, you know, we didn't even talk about this yet. Have you ever been to really poor places in the world? I don't know if you've ever.
Not in a direct one-on-one exchange.
Okay.
I'm sort of observing and driving through some places. Yes.
Well, maybe you can back this up. I don't know, but I've been to. I was in Guatemala. I was in Haiti twice. I think Guatemala only once. But every time, I mean, you're meeting people that have nothing. You know, like you show up and you see the little village that they have is kind of a mess.
Yeah.
And then you think about what happened last night while you were safe in your hotel, even though you complained about your hotel, right? Like, man, this is not like a hotel I'm used to. Like, these are some interesting accommodations. You know, we paid $15 for the hotel, but, you know, and it was a bed, like an actual bed, and there was running water, and there was all these things that we're used to having, but it was a little, you know. And then you go and you visit these people, and you realize, oh, that rain and that thunder and lightning that woke me up last night that I was all upset about and cranky about washed out their home. Like, came underneath the sticks that they had holding up their little hut and washed away whatever possessions they may have had and almost their children, right? And they had to go find a place. And we were there because a group of churches had made sizable collective donations to build several concrete, sturdy homes in this little village. and multiple families were huddled together in those few houses just to make sure that their kids didn't wash away. And I was complaining about,
Yeah.
you know, and here these people are like the happiest people in the world.
And it jumped out at me when you said you walk into this environment and you see these people who have nothing. By our standards, they have nothing, you know, because we can never have enough, you know. So when we look at people who don't count on having as much as we want, it's very disorienting and confusing.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, there's definitely something to it that, you know, not pursuing as much as others gives you a different perspective. You know, even here in this country, I remember years ago hearing a statistic on the radio. It may have changed since then, but Mississippi, you know, where I live, was for like 15 years in a row ranked lowest per capita income in the country and highest per capita charitable giving.
Wow.
You know, and I think you do see that, you know, especially in our profession, you know, where we're kind of attuned to this sort of participation in different congregations and different environments. You've probably seen it, you know.
Yeah. You don't need a whole lot. You may need some things, right? We need a certain amount of things. And let's be honest, just because we live where we live, we do need, in a sense, more than others.
To have a functional life, you know, in the sense that we're used to. Sure, absolutely.
There is nowhere for hundreds of miles from where we are right now that you could survive without a vehicle.
Oh, that's true.
Right. I mean, so you're talking about a car before. Do you need that car specifically that you're thinking about? Maybe not. You need all those add-ons? Maybe not. But you got to get a car. Mm-hmm. And so you may as well consider those things, right?
Yeah.
New York City is one place. You know, I'm from Long Island originally. New York City, actually, I mean, mass transit is a thing.
Right.
And it's pretty helpful. It saves a lot of aggravation, a lot of time. You know, in some ways saves you some money on gas, depending on how high gas prices are and how high the weekly or monthly passes are, you know. But you can't do that here. And you can't do that in many places, actually. So, okay, so we need a car. There aren't places that will let you have little huts.
That's true.
I mean, they'll be like, whoa, we got to, I mean, that's just our culture at this point. So you sort of need a house with 4 walls and a slab, at least, you know. So it's, you know, I just say that so that we don't beat ourselves up too much.
Yeah, we, you know, our the romantic notions of poverty can become idols. You know.
Yeah, like you were talking about the idea with the screw tape.
Right. Exactly. You know,
I'm being so holy and pious.
And
no, take it back.
Yeah.
But I think the issue there was, I haven't read that in a while, but just hearing about it and thinking about it again. The issue is she did it every time in front of people.
Exactly.
So that she could get, you know, sort of a dopamine hit. She could get, you know, the drug, right? She's getting
high.
this like, yeah, that's the word I was looking for, a high off of, hey, everybody, look at how non-gluttonous I am for food. But boy, am I gluttonous for praise.
That's right.
The praise of people and the accolades of human beings, right? Like that's something. And we can do that by forcing ourselves into poverty.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't know that we need to do that. In fact,
I believe that's called a martyr complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I feel like we could have more, or at least more resources, and also therefore be more able to bless others.
Sure.
There was actually book I read. I forget when it was. This guy, The Wealth Conundrum, I think is the name of the book.
I think I've come across
It's
that
a little
one.
book.
Yeah.
Old, maybe 15, 20 years. Not old, but like not anytime recently. And this guy kind of makes the case like, hey, basically God gave me this ability to know how to make like billions of dollars in investing and all that kind of stuff. And, for a long time I was basically like, well, this is wrong. And then I said, no, well, God just wants me to do right with it. And he actually does some pretty astounding things. Like he's like, I made all this money, and then God's like, well, give it away. And so he gave it all away. But then he kept making the money. It's like, okay, well, I do think that God works through people to elevate or to raise more resources. I mean, God can certainly just do it, but we're Lutheran. We know God works through stuff. He works through people.
Right,
He works
yes.
it right. Like so.
Yeah.
So certainly he could, and in some cases it feels like he does. But he's going to use people like this guy.
Sure.
He's going to use people like the people in our congregations and other congregations that are gifted in these ways, and the response is not more stuff.
Right.
The response is, okay, yeah, remember that it's not like, hey, 10%, people talk a lot about tithing, right?
Right.
It's not like 10% and then no matter how much you make, it's just as long as you're doing 10%. No, actually, like, you have made so much, like it's an ungodly amount of money, pardon
Right.
the expression, but maybe you only need 40% of that. Where's the other 60% going? You don't need all this other stuff.
And this isn't a compulsory thing.
Freely.
It is. Yeah. It's where is your heart?
Yeah.
That's the question these commandments ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where's your heart at? So don't love nothing that can't love you back. Guy down the hall said that to me not
Smart
that long
guy.
ago. Yeah. Definitely a smart guy. So.
Yeah.
So have we exhausted this?
I think we have.
Enlightened people?
And your listeners now know everything they need to know about the 10 Commandments and never have to broach this subject again, right?
Yeah, well, maybe. Or maybe they got a long way to go. So there's I got a Bible app here. I've been wanting to read this, and maybe just before we go. It's in Philippians.
Okay.
I believe it's Philippians 4 where Paul, who's in prison, is talking about contentment, right? And of course, we've got rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious. And then, bringing everything to him in prayer. And then he talks about God's provision. I rejoiced in the Lord. This is verse 10. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. That's what we're talking about here at the end, right? Knowing how to have nothing and how to have everything, abounding, right? In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me.
Yeah.
Right? So this isn't like I can go knock out my opponent.
Quite possibly one of the most misunderstood verses in the entire Bible.
I mean, the context of that verse is, man, you're going to have some good days and you're going to have some bad days.
That's right.
And you're going to learn how to be content no matter what the situation.
That's right.
Of course, he's talking about after that, it was kind of you to share my trouble, and you Philippians yourselves know that in the beginning of the gospel, right? So he's talking about this partnership and giving and receiving and sharing and all that kind of stuff, and sort of ends it off. And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. To our God and Father be glory forever and ever. Amen. So just maybe something to close it out, that no matter what situation you find yourself in, you can be, you should be, you will feel a lot better if you are content.
Yeah.
So
that's why we do this. That's why we're engaged in our faith, because it is a learned thing. That's the point Paul was making there, you know. And
I have learned,
yeah, and not all of us are there, you know. And sometimes we get there and then we backslide, and we need to be reminded, you know. And that's why we stay engaged. So.
I have learned how to be brought low.
Yeah,
God has a way of bringing us low again.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a lot of ways I can be brought low, you know, and there's ways I can do it to myself. There's ways the world can do it. And then there's God's way. And only one of those really strengthens me in the end. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, all, great to be with you. Hope you've enjoyed this. We may be taking a look at the close of the commandments next time. I got to talk with our buddy Brock here after we shut off the mics, and then after that, who knows? Maybe the Apostles' Creed, or I don't know what. But
we'll figure something out.
Hope you've enjoyed this. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things, and you're looking for gratitude, ways to be grateful. My wife is, I can put in a little plug, I think, right? She's got these gratitude journals out there. On Amazon, I've got a Sweet Jesus Tacos prayer journal. Tacos is an acronym for thinking through praying. And the T is, what are you thankful for? So gratitude there. So we've tried to put that into a lot of these things. But take a look, check it out. You can search Emil Gretarsson, Heather Gretarsson on Amazon, and hope to catch up with you again real soon.